Take their seats.
Hold on, Judge. Give me a second.
You just have to wait one more minute for audio-visual difficulties. We good, Jerry? Okay, I'm going to ask the town clerk to do the roll call, please.
David Becker. Here. Michael Hurley. Here. Gaylord Meyer. Here. Carolyn Richmond. Here. Eric Sonman. Here. Pete Ambrose. Here. John Matola. Here. Jeff Steele.
Here.
Chad Stewart. Here. Keith Varian. Here. Ed Bateson. Here. Tom Conley. Here. Hank Ferentz. Here. Dave McKenzie. Here. Mary McCullough. Here. Heather Dean. Joe DiMartino. Here. Art Hug. Here. Amy Mezoff. Here. Joe Palmer. Here. Matt Ambrose. Josh Garskoff. Here. Chris McAleese. Here. Ruth Smay. Here. Ann Stamler. Here. Chris Brogan. Here. Lenora Campbell. Here. Julie Gottlieb. Here. Sheila Marmion. Here. Jay Wolf. Here. Jen Hochberg. Here. Kevin Hopkins. Here. Eric Newman. Mark Patton. Here. Hal Schwartz. Here. Kathy Braun. Here. Dana Carey. Here. Alan Marks. Here. Tom McCarthy. Here. Jeff Stopa. Here. Bill D'Amica. Here. Joe Fellner. Here. Ellen Jacob. Here. Nick Marabli. Present. Carol Pontrelli. Here. Lee Hannum. Here. Ken Lee. Here. Bruce Ryan. Here. Carol Way. Here. Dave Weber.
Welcome everyone to tonight's RTM budget meeting. Thank you all for taking time away from your families and evening activities to come out tonight. As you can see, we have a packed room, and that is why we changed venues so that we could accommodate the public better than past years when people float out in the hallways at other schools. I'd like to go over, actually first we're going to go back and we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we could all stand up, there's a flag up on the wall. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. If you could just stay standing for a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you. I'd just like to start off by mentioning a few procedural and housekeeping items. In terms of the process, at last Monday's RTM meeting, members announced their intentions to cut the budget in different departments. Based on an opinion that has come from the town attorney, proposed cuts will be made tonight on a line item basis only. According to the town charter, the RTM must pass a budget on the first Monday of May. After this is done, the Board of Finance will then determine the mill rate once they see the final budget and projected revenue numbers. I want to make clear my intention to run this meeting as smoothly and efficiently as possible and allow for full and equal debate among members of this body, which include the ex officio members to my right, members of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, Chairman of the Board of Education, as well as the town attorney and the town clerk to my right. Tonight there will not be an opportunity for public comment, as that opportunity was at last Monday's meeting. Based on the number of people here tonight, it would not be in the interest of time and expediency alone to open up this for comment. This body must get down to business, and it must be completed tonight and possibly tomorrow night. In addition, all of us have received emails or phone calls or have read letters to the editor expressing opinions and viewpoints on the budget process. They have all been effective ways to communicate a message to this legislative body. Further, RTM members have held neighborhood or constituent gatherings, as well as the public hearings, budget hearings, the open committee meetings, and again last week's full RTM meeting, all of which the public has been able to attend. Further, the expansion of Fair TV has given the people of Fairfield another important outlet through which they can watch our proceedings. This year we have witnessed significant debate and emotion throughout the town about the budget, probably the most in recent years. There have been heated disagreements and passionate discussions between and among RTM members and the public. However, as I mentioned, tonight will not be another occasion to continue the open and emotional dialogue as defined in the RTMs with the public. As defined in the RTM's rules to regulate, as moderator, I have an obligation to preserve order and decorum, and if there is any disturbance, disorderly conduct, or other activity in or about the meeting hall which may impede the orderly transaction of the business of the meeting, the moderator may take such action deemed necessary to preserve and restore order. I mention this so that we do not have a repeat of last week's meeting or worse. So, to repeat, whether a person agrees or disagrees with another person in this room on any issue said in the past or to be said at this meeting, I ask everyone to show respect to all speakers and refrain from any whistling, clapping, booing, hissing, or any other noise you can think of that would be constituted as a disruption of this meeting. Further, any personal attacks, name-calling, accusatory, or aggressive dialogue directed at members of this body from the public, between members of this body, or between members of the public will not be tolerated. If there is a tone or use of words that goes beyond the bounds of standard decorum, such people will be called out of order, and depending on the nature of the dialogue, asked to sit down or possibly leave the room. As you can see, there is also a police presence in the gym in case anything does get out of control or becomes unmanageable. Now, on a much more positive note, we are very glad you all came out tonight to be involved passively in this discussion. Everyone in this room cares about our town and its prosperity, and we will now proceed with a very democratic process of considering and voting on our town budget for the next fiscal year. So without further ado, we will move to the next item, which is number 2, to consider and act upon proposed appropriations in the amount of $273,382,694 for the fiscal year of July 1, 2012 through June 30th, 2013. Mr. Becker? Right there. The other microphone's right there. You're just gonna have to take it, yeah, just take it right off and just stand near.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, David Becker, Mr. Form. On the housekeeping side, I'd actually like to move that we consider item number 4, which is a procedural item that we have on the agenda at this time, briefly before heading into the budget to get that off the agenda.
So your motion is to waive the rules, suspend the rules, and take an item out of order?
Out of order, number 4 at this time.
Take number 4 and consider that now?
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a second? Representative Schwartz, we need a 2/3 on this to suspend the rules. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Representative Dean, Representative Stewart, abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. We're now going to consider item number 4. Actually, to consider and act upon a motion to suspend Rule 32 of the Rules to Regulate the proceedings of the representative town meeting of the town of Fairfield in order that the forthcoming redistricting ordinance not be required to, 1, be initially referred to the Committee on Legislation and Administration, and 2, be formally listed on the warning for 2 meetings and discussed by appropriate committees prior to each meeting. The purpose of such action is to allow for the proposed ordinance to be considered by standing committees on May 14 and 16 and brought to the full RTM for a vote on May 21st. May I have a motion on this item, a second on this item? Representative Stamler, and we're now going to go to discussion among the body. Representative Stamler.
And Stanley, District 5. Mr. Moderator, I would like to move to amend this motion for the purpose of clarifying it that it applies only to the redistricting ordinance for the year 2012 and cannot in the future be seen as a precedent for waiving the reading at legislation and administration. So I would like to amend this ordinance as follows. In the last sentence, the purpose of such action is to allow for the proposed ordinance to be considered by standing committees on May 14th and 16th, add 2012, and brought to the full RTM for a vote on May 21st, add 2012, and then the following words. And the motion is limited to the 2012 redistricting and these dates.
2012 redistricting. In these dates. Okay, so there is now an amendment on the floor to amend the motion by adding in, as Representative Stamler said, May 14th and 16th, 2012, and brought to the full RTM for a vote on May 21st with the addition of 2012, and the motion is limited to the 2012 redistricting and these dates. Do I have a second on that motion? Representative Ferentz. Now we're going to have discussion on the amendment, specifically on those words. Is there any discussion on those words? Okay. We're now going to vote on the amendment to add these words to the proposed motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay. The motion to amend passes. We're now back at the full newly amended motion, which I can read, or you can have the waive the reading. Second for waiving the reading, Representative Lee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Any discussion on the new item as amended? Okay, so we are now going to vote on this newly amended motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, and that's a 2/3, so that does carry. Now we're going to go back to item number 2 that I was halfway through reading, but I will read again. Okay, next item, number 2. To consider and act upon proposed appropriations in the amount of $273,382,694 for the fiscal year of July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2013, as recommended by the Board of Finance and amended by the RTM on April 30th, 2012, for any lawful purpose, and to adopt the following resolution. Resolved that the budget for the fiscal year of July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2013, as recommended by the Board of Finance in its 2012-2013 Town of Fairfield Budget Report and recommendations, submitted to this meeting, a copy of which report and recommendations is annexed hereto and made a part of this resolution, is hereby adopted, that the salaries of the town officials are approved as set forth herein, and that the sum of $273,382,694 for said budget be and hereby is appropriated. The total proposed budget as approved by the Board of Finance as amended by the representative town meeting on April 30th, 2012 is as follows. Gross budget, $273,382,694, less estimated receipts of $25,626,101. Net budget of $247,756,593, plus reserve for uncollected taxes of $4,229,790. The amount to be raised by taxation is therefore $251,986,383. This item was referred to all standing committees, but we're not going to give committee reports, as those have not been changed. We have not had committee meetings since the prior RTM meeting. So, do I have a motion to approve this budget? Representative Schwartz, second. Representative Mottola. This budget is now on the floor for discussion. Is there any discussion? Representative Becker. Oh, I would, you want to do it here? Okay, that's fine.
If I could. Thank you. David Becker, District 1.
some prepared remarks regarding where we are today regarding the budget and the proposal that was released last week and where I believe we are headed as a town. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Perfect. Thank you. In the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, Fairfield has become so highly leveraged with financial and contractual liabilities that we have added $10 million to the budget in each of the last 2 budget cycles. These liabilities are often driven by labor expenses, including health care, post-retirement benefits, and compensation. Our debt service also contributes to these ballooning liabilities. The opportunity was lost to implement any organizational.
Yes. Yep. We're looking at discussion and motion.
This is very specifically,
I'm
Mr.
going to
Moderator,
let
tied
this
to
go
this
because he's
budget.
discussing the budget.
Thank you. The opportunity was lost to implement any organizational or structural reforms to begin reversing the trend in this budget. The budget delivered to the RTM came with an unacceptable tax increase with no indication of plans to change the trend next year or an understanding of possible short-term savings, if any, of the 5 or so outstanding labor contracts. So what should we do? Do we accept 4 to 5% tax increases each year? Or do we compel the town to do something to break the cycle? If this issue is too messy and too ugly for anyone else to accept, something must be done. Fairfield is at a tipping point where it is simply impossible to maintain a flat year-over-year budget without a combination of structural budgetary reforms, labor concessions, and/or reductions in services. Our community is becoming less and less affordable each year, and taxpayers who are already battered by the economy, by decreased home values, and by state taxes increasing, and other rising costs relating to health, food, and energy, have reached a saturation point. Affordability is the primary driver of prosperity of any community, and we need to act quickly to stop this trend of $10+ million annual budget increases. There are no quick and easy solutions either. People are leaving, and since property values are inversely related to property taxes, any gains we believe we have in value from our regional location and school system are being canceled out. What most people don't know or have not connected with is the importance of the recent revaluation that has so many in town outraged. Approximately 20% of the town absorbed the historic 10% decrease in our grand list, making it almost unnoticeable to the other 80% of the town. In fact, some 65% of households actually experienced a slight decrease in their tax rates last year. In some cases, those unlucky 20% saw their taxes increase from $20,000 to $30,000, having to find an extra $10,000 in their budget in a single year. Many are now selling their houses for less than its assessed value. Now they are being forced to invest even more money to sue the town to get a more realistic number. This is simply outrageous. Our town needs to break the cycle. We presented the Republican caucus what we believe to be a fiscally conservative proposal this body was in a position to offer, one that would start a much-needed conversation centered on the question, what services should this town provide and what is our willingness to fund them? Our budget plan was simple. We asked department heads to respond to us with the impact of a 2% reduction. We recommended protecting specific incremental expenses that help us ensure we maintain our important AAA bond rating. This plan spread the sacrifice across all town departments while empowering department heads to determine whether reductions can best be applied. We hope that this could force discussions on streamlining process in town hall and perhaps eliminating redundancies between the town and school district. Maintenance, information technology, and human resources are three glaring examples of duplication that should be immediately explored. To the surprise, I'm sure, of many, in many instances, the Board of Education happens to be leaps and bounds ahead of the town in efficiencies and modernization. While this discussion could indeed cause a reduction in services, we believe it was the kind of urgent action needed to gain control of the budget. Concerned taxpayers and concerned parents need to be clear on the trade-offs being made when we cut or fund services. Tonight's vote is the beginning of what we hope will be fruitful and continuing conversation on long overdue budget reform. The Republican caucus is committed to continuing this conversation through the summer with the First Selectman, department heads, and commissioners, along with the Board of Education, in an effort to find opportunities in the long haul to reduce the cost of government so we aren't here next year in the very same situation as one town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members like to discuss, make a statement, ask questions? Representative Hurley. Whatever you prefer. You could just take that one and stand right there.
Michael Hurley, proudly representing District 1. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I have a few questions for the town's distinguished Fiscal Officer, Paul Hiller. Do you have a mic there, Paul?
He's going to have to come up here, Paul.
I just wanted to review a few numbers that we spoke about last week. And as I understand it, the spending component of the budget is slated to rise 3.9%. And if this body accepts the budget as currently presented, the tax rate would increase 4.58%.
That is correct based on current information.
Okay. So the typical house that's assessed at $600,000, and 70% of that would be $420,000. And based on, I think, what you said in some calculations, they would be currently paying about $9,437, and under the new tax rate, they would be paying $9,870, which would be an increase of about $433.
Correct.
So when you look at the budget, and it talks about the amount to be raised by taxation, which I think is approximately $252 million, is it fair to say that taxation is a function of two variables, one being the mill rate and the assessed values, 70% of the assessed values assigned to the residential commercial properties?
Yes, there were.
Okay. I guess my next question is somewhat of a philosophical question, and if it's not appropriate, I'll withdraw it. And this would be to any member of the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance, or to you for that matter. Well, the two variables that are functions of the tax bill for the average home, for our homeowner, is the mill rate times the assessed properties. If there's an assessment issue in town, where there are lawsuits against the town, and this body is well aware, and we represent the people of this town, and many people agree that these numbers are way off, is it fair to support a budget where one of the two variables that determines someone's tax rate is incorrect for a notable minority of residents? And that doesn't have to be directed to you.
Can you ask your question to the microphone, Representative Hoffman?
Kevin Hoskins, District 7. My question is, point of order, Mr. Moderator, is it sounds like the question was phrased, is it fair to base our budget on something? That's a value question that we as RTM members, I don't think that's something appropriately asked to Mr. Hiller. If there's something in Mr. Hiller's area of expertise in his department that comes within his area of knowledge, then that would be an appropriate question. But asking whether it's fair to base it on it, I think that's something that we make a decision on here as elected representatives. So I would ask that that's just not an appropriate question.
Representative Hurley, would you like to rephrase your question?
No, I pose that as a philosophical question. That question was not specifically directed to our town's fiscal officer. It was directed toward any member of the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance to talk about the tax assessment issue in this town, and given the number of appeals, lawsuits that we have against this town, whether anyone has a particular opinion they want to share. If no one wants to speak to it, that's fine.
So I'll open that up to anybody. It's a fair enough question.
From a philosophical standpoint, just from a practical standpoint, the property taxes, you're correct. I would make one edit in your comments, that in fact it's 70% of the appraised value that becomes the assessed value. It's then that assessed value that's multiplied times the mill rate to come up with the tax rate.
Okay.
For a
Thank
given
you for the
property.
clarification.
Just so we're using the
Okay.
right terminology.
Yep.
In terms of the correctness or incorrectness of the assessment, the tax assessor at the time, Tom Brown, signed off on the validity of the grand list and the assessment and the process. There's a number of tests that they run that through, and Tom Brown was comfortable in his professional opinion that that assessment met those tests. In terms of the process by which we agree or disagree with that, we do allow the citizens, the process does allow the citizens to appeal that. As you pointed out, there are a number of doing that. We've gotten a number of those resolved currently, and we're working on getting the rest resolved. And every property is treated individually, so if there's any inaccuracies or difference of opinion, they get a chance to get resolved. And Mr. Hurley, as we pointed out, I think we've had a discussion on this before.
Several.
We're actually have the appraiser, the independent third-party appraiser who was hired to do this work for the town, coming in and, in essence, defending his opinion and valuation in the process that went through. So it's a chance to have all of that corrected if there are corrections to make.
Thank you. No additional questions.
Any other members? Representative Hopkins.
Kevin Hopkins, District 7. I'd just like to correct a few things that were said by Mr. Becker, by Representative Becker a few moments ago. I don't think it's fair to say that this budget was presented without a plan to prevent or to make changes in some of our long-term obligations. I'm looking at the budget drivers in our budget, and I think if you look, there have been some major changes. If you look at health insurance from general fund activities, it's actually, sorry,
Speak more in the microphone.
it's actually flat or slightly down 1%. One of the things that's, out of the $9 million increase in the proposed budget, $1 million is from paving. We all know where that's going. We're taking it off of bonding and we're putting it onto the regular budget. And as I understand it, next year we probably won't be doing any, it'll be on the budget and won't be an increase. I don't think it's fair to say at all that there's no plan. I have been over issues concerning workers' comp with Mary Carol Miralles, and I know that there is actually a plan in place to deal more with workers' comp claims, which is up this year. As a matter of fact, I'd like to ask the First Selectman if you would like to comment on any of the things that, I mean, particularly concerning the workers' comp, things that are going to be done to try to change those things, or any of the other things that are the drivers in the budget on a long-term cycle.
So you'd like to ask through me then, right?
Mr. the First Selectman.
Through me.
Through you, oh, yes, of course.
Mr. First Selectman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Basically, the process we're going through is all about what the vision is for our town. Tonight is one of the building blocks for that. But it's very much about our vision, what we want for our community. Our proposed budget put together and came together with a 0% tax increase for the items that the department heads control. We basically came back with the same budget that was approved by this body a year ago, except for the cost drivers. And the cost drivers are some of our multi-year commitments. We saw a third of that tax increase, a third of that $10 million, was due to the Board of Ed increase. The smallest increase they've requested in over 50 years, but a small increase times a big number is still a sizable number. A third of those drivers, a third of that tax increase, was basically investments in our financial foundation, specifically designed to lower our tax increases in the future. We put extra money into surplus. We call it a supplemental payment to surplus. That hasn't been done before in this town. That's specifically to address not only what the AAA or what the credit rating agencies have said about our AAA rating currently, but planning for the future to make sure that we keep our surplus at the level that it should be. It's something that we haven't addressed before. We're being proactive about that and making sure that's part of our plan going forward. We put in a supplemental payment to address our risk management issue. That's something that hasn't been done before. That's a multi-year commitment to make sure that we stay on top of our workers' comp and risk management issues. Again, to make sure that our internal service fund, which specifically was addressed by Moody's when they gave us the negative outlook, was addressed not only for this time, but going forward. A third of our tax increase was in multi-year commitments, things like debt service, things like OPEB, our medical retiree commitment. These are commitments that are made either to our employees or to our town or to our building structure over time. For the last 2 years, the Board of Finance has led a charge and led the initiative to put together a capital planning workshop. We've put together new tools to help manage our debt and to make sure that we stay on top of it and that the debt service starts coming down and in the very near term is no longer a driver for our budget. We did all this with no decrease in town services. And the credit rating agency, Moody's, when they recently reviewed us, recognized our efforts, recognized the progress that is made by all three boards, the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and this RTM, in supporting strengthening our balance sheet, took a look at, normally they only give us credit for what we've already done. They took a very strong look at what we had in plan for 2012 this year, because it wasn't over, and even looked ahead to fiscal year 2013 as part of our budget and specifically addressed points there, and were pleased with the progress. They were pleased with our budget message, right? And pointed that out to us in the meeting when they held it up and said, we like the fact that you're addressing the rating, we like the fact that you have in writing for all the town residents what you're doing about the internal service fund. This is but one step in the journey to balancing our needs and affordability. But you've got to balance a budget based on a strong foundation, and what we're doing this year is going back and taking steps to address that foundation. To help the discussion, which started on February 16th, almost 3 months ago. We've most recently this past week asked the department heads to go back and prepare, if they had 2% less in their departments, where could we get the minimum impact on town services and still refrain that money? We've prepared that and gotten it out to this body as well as on the town website to help the discussion and to assist the RTM in making an informed decision. It was done for each line item to allow this body to see clearly and with complete transparency what the impact of cutting some, all, or none of the items would be. We have a chance to make a decision for our community on what services we value and what the value of those services is for the dollars we're paying for them. And we leave that in the hands of this body. As we've seen, these discussions can get emotional at times. And the one thing that I would ask as we proceed here to come up with a solution that's comprehensive and is what's best for our entire community. We realize that we were neighbors when we came in here, and when the discussion's over and the decisions have been made, we'll still be neighbors. So let's please keep that in mind as we move forward. But Mr. Hopkins, thank you, and I hope that answers your question.
Did it answer your question? Okay. Any other members? Representative McCarthy? If you don't have documents, I'm going to ask to use this microphone here, unless you need the podium. Whatever you want.
Mike, that was a very good impromptu speech. I want to say that we could approve a $10 million increase to the budget tonight, and that would be the path of least resistance. If we choose to do so, we need to understand that in all likelihood, we'll be facing a similar increase next year. At current course and speed, we'll continue to see budget increases this magnitude for years to come, because we've been able to effectively place in check the underlying drivers of the increases. The frustration level of taxpayers has already bubbled up, and the only reason the cry is not more broad-based than it actually is because to some extent the effects of the budget increase have been disguised by the reevaluation. The only way that things will change is for us to change the way we do business. If we continue to pay for our services at ever-increasing rates, we demonstrate to those negotiating our contractual obligations that our demand is elastic. We need to demonstrate that our demand is inelastic. Things will not change until taxpayers, through this elected body, sends a message that as price of services become more, we can afford less. What we once thought as needs, we can only, we will have to accept as wants when it comes to looking at things in terms of what we can afford. We have good managers on the town side who are better qualified than any member of this body to identify things that they no longer need to do. We should continue to allow them to manage the numbers. On the Board of Ed side, in terms of addressing cutting spending, I would not endorse cutting teachers. I would encourage the Board of Ed and Dr. Title to look at reducing the number of administrators, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other members? Representative Braun?
I'm looking at a history of the budget going back 10 or 15 years. 10 years ago, the budget was $169 million. This year, the proposed budget is $273. The increase is $104 million over a 10-year period. That's a 61% increase. That's just cannot stand. There is fat in this budget, and there is room to cut the increase. Last year, here's an example, we spent $114,000 on a law firm to give a legal opinion that the former First Selectman and former town attorney led us down the wrong path on the Metro Center. We all know that that cost us a lot of money and extra bonding as well. That whole Metro Center debacle has cost the town a lot of money. And to this day, by the way, money is still being spent on lawyers to keep Mr. Stanky off the Metro Center site. I don't know why. That's money that shouldn't be spent on lawyers, on litigation, and everything else.
Kathy, we got to get off the Metro Center.
Yeah, I'm talking about the budget. This has to do with the budget. This has to do with money this town is spending. This year, the Town Facilities Commission is not looking at Board of Ed capital projects. It did the prior year. I don't know why it's not this year, but when I talked to the chairman, Mr. Gallagher, he informed me that their review of the prior year's Board of Ed capital projects had saved us a couple $1 million. We need to have things like this implemented. There are so many anecdotal pieces of evidence that I've heard. I can't even begin to list them, and unfortunately, a lot of people that tell them are people that work for the town and they're afraid of losing their jobs. There's fat in the budget. We cannot keep going up $100 million in a 10-year period. So there's room to cut the increase to something more reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Lake. Wherever you want.
Hi, Ken Lee, District 10. Good for you. I have a lot less to say after Mr. Tetro. I'm sure you're all aware that Moody's has affirmed the town's AAA bond rating and revised the outlook from negative to stable. I would like to congratulate the First Selectman and the Chief Fiscal Officer on an excellent presentation to Moody's to achieve this result. Major thanks must also go to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance collectively for working together.
Just speak into it a little more.
Oh, okay. We're working together in a bipartisan effort to make the difficult decisions necessary to get us back on a stable financial footing. We as a group all participated in this process as well, and I think we should all be proud of our town and what we have accomplished. It is worthwhile to note that this upgrade revision was based on the budget now before us as presented by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. There have been a lot of calls for increased transparency in town government, and I could not agree with that more. There was a proposal last Monday night for an across-the-board 2% cut to be executed by the department managers. The rationale for that was that they would know where the lowest impact cuts could be made. That night, I expressed the concern that this would impact services and we would have no way to evaluate what that impact would be on the public. We were, in effect, being asked to vote blind, with the exception of the Board of Ed budget, of course. To me, that was abdicating our responsibility to represent the public, and I was not comfortable with that idea. I'm still not comfortable with that idea. I'm pleased to hear that we have changed our mind on that, because it's our responsibility, as has been pointed out by all of the previous speakers, to represent the people, and we can't represent the people unless we know what it is that we're doing. I would also like to apologize to all those in the public who were kind of kept in the dark and were unaware of what was going to transpire last week on the only night of public comment. I'll just leave it at that. I think the way many of our citizens felt about the process was made abundantly clear to all of us in the flood of emails we received over the last few days. Now to the task at hand. The First Selectman asked all the departments, as he said, to provide information on what the cuts should be, should a cut be approved, and the impact of those cuts to our citizens. We now have all that information. I believe we owe it to our citizens to review those documents and vote on them individually, and I am pleased that we are using that process. Only in that way do we truly exercise the responsibility we accepted when we took office. That process allows our citizens to understand what we have voted on, what the cost of them will be either way, either in dollars or in service cuts, and where each representative stands. That is true transparency, when each individual is willing to state their position in the light of day. I'll skip the next part because it's not important and just go right to the back of the very end of this. I represent District 10. District 10 was a district in which there was a significant change in assessments. I know because I lived there. To the 6 o'clock tonight, the last time I checked my email, I had gotten 0 complaints by email, by phone, in person. I've spoken to people on my street whose taxes, mine for example, went up significantly last year because we're here because we want to be. Because we believe in the town, we believe in the school system, we believe in the services we provide. We've been here for almost 50 years and we're not going anywhere because this is where we want to be and we're willing to pay to have the things that we think we should have. Thank you.
I please ask you to hold your applause again. Thank you. Next member. Any other comments, discussion? Yes, Representative Jacob?
Hello, Ellen Jacob, District 9. I wanted to say I'm relieved about the Moody's report, too. It did make us grateful and to all the work that did go towards bolstering up our funds so that we could get this corrected report. But there are things in it that still worry me. And they mostly have to do with, in the same credit report, there is a statement about factors that could make the rating go down. And they're exactly what we've been talking about tonight. I think that when we try to consider what everybody wants, we also need to consider how we need to protect what we just worked so hard to come back to a good and secure rating on our credit and our bonds. The two factors, and I'm quoting from the Global Credit Research from the Moody's Investors Service, the report of May 3rd, is the deterioration of the town's tax base and demographic profile. There is also a sort of challenge that they include in the statement, and the challenge for the future, quote, is Fairfield's ability to implement financial improvement plans in an environment of lackluster economic recovery and lower assessed valuations. We still have through you to the moderator, to Paul Hiller, just one question, and then I'm done. Mr. Hiller, you had mentioned, and I think it was mentioned earlier tonight, that we have been making headway on some of these reassessment lawsuits, but that the number that or the amount of property that is still in these legal laws, tied up in the legal lawsuits, was quite a big sum of property, right? About 400 million? And that the tax rate could actually have to be a little bit higher, because I know you said you thought it would be absorbed in some way, but I would think that we're not sure what our grand list might be at the end of all of that.
As you've mentioned, the town is a defendant in several lawsuits where people have challenged their assessments, both on the 2010 grand list and on the 2011 grand list. That is the remedy that these taxpayers have before them. That is a remedy that is available to them through the courts when they've exhausted their remedies with the Board of Assessment Appeals. We're, as far as the 2010 grand list is concerned, there are a significant number of remaining appeals to be adjudicated in the courts. The town attorney and the attorney who represents the town were in court today, are scheduled in court later this month, and this process will continue on the 2010 grand list at least through the end of this calendar year, if not further. We have had discussions with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and have kept them apprised to the legal proceedings as far as these are concerned. They are aware of it, and when the Board of Finance goes to set the mill rate on Wednesday evening, the adjustments will be made accordingly. We have been we feel successful in the defense of the assessments that we've had to date. There are, I don't have an exact number, there are some appeals that have recently been filed in the last 30 days on the 2011 grand list. The time frame for that closes, I believe, at the end of this week, but we are equally prepared to defend those appeals. But we are able to, we feel that frankly, what will be a modest decline in the level of the grand list is something that is accounted for within the tax calculations for this particular budget.
Mr. Heller, I don't know if the question was exactly addressed. Representative Jacobs, could you?
I'll just repeat, how much in assessed property, a figure or an approximation, that is still in dispute in these legal cases?
There are, and I'd have to go over, there were originally assessed valuations in excess of $425 million. That's assessed valuations. That number has been decreased, I would think, as a result today of today's actions. That number may have been decreased by roughly 10%. I'd ask Mr. Ross, who's in the audience someplace, if that's a approximate number. Mr. Ross?
Who are you asking?
Donald Ross, the assessor.
Is Donald Ross here? Just give it shorter than give it shorter than as possible.
10%, about roughly 40 million.
All right, somebody address that.
It's advice.
Yes.
It's litigation strategy. I don't think it's.
Yeah, it's litigation strategy. I really don't want to discuss the numbers right now. There is no.
Into the microphone.
Yeah. You can't really give you an exact number right now. We're working through the court case load. We're making progress. Really, I really can't say any more than that. We're making progress on the litigation. We're working the caseload down. I think we've settled approximately 28 to 30 cases of the about 170 cases that we had. We're managing the caseload, but really more than that, I can't get into.
It's all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you both, but it does seem like this is going on a long time for a lot of dollars. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Representative Richmond?
Carolyn Richmond, District 1. In all of the talk about the lowest increase, 0% increase without cutting services, I believe we've forgotten one thing: the ability of our taxpayers to pay the increasing increase in taxes that they've seen year after year. When last week we asked the department heads what would a 2% decrease look like, in any business, that is a very normal operation that you go through. Having worked in Fortune 500 companies and in small companies, We went through that all the time. What do you do to reduce 2%, 1%? I have to say, I printed them all out, and I was a little disappointed. I had hoped for a little more imagination, a little more creativity in terms of thinking outside of the box. Not choosing things that would elicit emotional outpourings. That's not the way you run a business. That's not the way we should be running this town. If you cannot find at least 1% in a $273 million budget, then we're not doing our job. Because that's what we're asking every household in this city, in this town to do. And they don't have it. They have not been receiving increases. Last year, taxes went up. This year, their taxes will go up. I can guarantee them next year taxes will go up. And the year after that, taxes will go up. Unfortunately, their personal incomes are not rising at that rate. Now, last week somebody said you can't get blood from a rock. Well, in Texas we'd say you can't get blood from a turnip. And this turnip is done. We just cannot spend any more money. We cannot continue to ask our taxpayers to spend more money. Have we done a better job this year? Yeah. But we're not finished. There is still room in this budget for reductions, for efficiency, for thinking about doing things differently. Just because we've done something the same way each year does not mean that's the only way to achieve your goal. I have taught school. I have been in a number of different school districts around the country. People do things differently, but they achieve the same, they have the same goals, and they achieve the same success. We just have to work harder. We have to dig down and tell our taxpayers, we hear you. Enough is enough. We are going to stop the rate of increasing spending. Thank you. Which means I don't like the budget.
Representative Sundman.
Good evening. Eric Sundman, District 1. On behalf of the taxpayers of District 1, we feel there is no fairness in taxation. And through you, Mr. Moderator, to the First Selectman, what can we do to rectify this problem? The math is wrong and too many people are affected.
Mr. First Selectman.
At this point, unfortunately, once the grand list was signed off on by the prior town assessor, that can't be changed. So the only option at this point is go back, and for anyone who feels their assessment is incorrect, to appeal that and give us a chance to step through and listen to the argument and hear it on both sides.
Thank you, and I would urge anyone in District 1 to exercise their right and go back to the town and do what you can. I mean, this is all we can do. Very sorry.
Can I make one clarification? And just to be clear, that's based on state statute. That's not the town deciding that. That's state statute in terms of how the process works.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? Representative Hopkins. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, perhaps I'm missing something here. Is there something, a motion we need to do to move the process along to start getting to amendments to the budget? And people have requested cuts. I'm just, okay.
Yeah, I mean, right now is the time for discussion among members, questions. Right now, everything is according to how we've done it in the past, and this is fine. The only way we get to a vote is when people stop coming up to the microphone.
I would just urge members, please, if you have amendments that you want to make, please, let's start to make them. It's already, but almost, it's 9:20, please, let's start the day going. Thank you.
Representative Meyer.
Good evening. Gaylord Meyer, District 1. First, I think it's important that we get very clear on something, and that is we are not cutting the budget. I'll say it again. We are not cutting the budget. We have asked to amend the increases that have been presented to us in the 2012-13 budget. Amend the increases. 2% across the board, I think, was a fair thing to do. It does not affect any of the contractual agreements that the Board of Ed or the town has, in keeping in good stead with Moody's. This week I've received hundreds, as I'm sure all of you have, from the PTA, from parents, from neighbors, who have very strong opinions about this evening. But I think it's important that the PTA and the parents and the children and everybody here is clear. We are amending the increases. We're asking for fiscal responsibility. What had gotten in emails is, I am deteriorating the schools. I'm decimating programs. I'm losing significant education. Eliminating programs. This is not a true statement. Every year, Dr. Title and the Board of Ed presents us with a budget and a bottom line number that we get to vote on. After we vote on this, Dr. Title can do with what he likes with that number. He can spend it the way he wants to. If the parents are upset by programs being cut, they need to take that up with Dr. Title, not the RTM. The audit that was done a few years ago recommended that the administrative part of the Board of Ed was very top-heavy. And yet these administrators are still there, and they've all continued to get increases. Yet there is 7.1% of unemployment in the town of Fairfield. There is an over 8% unemployment nationally. Our homes and our neighbors and people are still losing their jobs. I cannot support this budget. It is not responsible. These children have got the best education. They've got great teachers. They have a wonderful Board of Ed. They've got a great PTA that will take good care of them. But we cannot continue to do this. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Mottola?
Good evening. John Mottola, District 2. Just for any of us to come up here and say that we're going to recommend a cut to any department and then wash our hands of the effect of that cut is, in my opinion, just irresponsible. There are significant consequences if we make some of these cuts to the budget. And it's our responsibility as RTM members to look at what the effects of any cuts would be on the budget. And to say that things would be fine and dandy if we make a $3 million cut to the Board of Education simply is not true. We would lose anywhere from 25 to 30 certified teaching positions if that happened. You got that from Dr. Title. That's not fiction, that's fact. And things will be different in Fairfield and in the Fairfield public school system if we go in that direction. And, maybe that's the direction we want to go in. I don't think so. I have received hundreds upon hundreds of emails from the taxpayers of Fairfield. And the vast majority of those emails for the entire budget, Board of Ed and town, is against these cuts. So I'm listening to the taxpayer. And I think that's what we have to do. Now, we simply can't say that if we cut, it's not our problem. It is our problem, and it's a decision that we have to make. And maybe we want a different town of Fairfield. I don't think we do. I think we want to maintain the services that we have in this town. And I think this is a very fair budget across the board. It's responsible, it maintains services, it maintains our educational system, and I think we should support it. And then one other thing that the prior speaker said was this fiction, with all due respect to her, that the Board of Education is top-heavy with respect to administration. The fact is, the operational audit that I helped get going when I was on the Board of Ed said the exact opposite. It said, in fact, that Fairfield Public Schools were not top-heavy with respect to administrators. In fact, they recommended that we hire some more. That was the educational thing to do. But we didn't do that, nor has Dr. Title done that, recognizing the financial difficulties that we're in today. So, I've heard from the taxpayers. I think we should support this budget, and thank you, Mr. Steele, and thank you, everyone.
Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hal Schwartz, District 7. I just want to follow up on Representative Matola said. Why is the opinion of the parents or any other body who does not want to make a reduction in this budget not matter? We've all gotten the emails. We all know what's going on. Okay, 90% of the emails that we got said, don't cut the budget. So that means 90% of the town says, don't cut the budget. I'm a representative for District 7. I represent the people who live in my neighborhood. They told me via emails, telephones, and when I see them everywhere, don't cut the budget. The emails are running 7 to 1 in my district. Who am I to decide what to do for them if this is what they tell me to do? I support the budget because they told me to support the budget. They put me here. They're the reason we're here. Doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter on an individual basis. Those are the people that make a difference. Those are the people who tell us what to do. 90% of them said, keep the budget the way it is. The town has spoken. Listen to what they do. Support the budget the way it is. Thank you.
Representative Palmer.
I'll take the podium. Joe Palmer, District 4. I was at a town hall 2 weeks ago, and there wasn't one person there that conveyed anything but a sense of struggle with the tax increases that have occurred over the last few years. And that was a multiple district town hall. Just in general, we're the first selectman had gone through a process of asking all the departments to come in at a 0% increase from last year's budget. And we saw a $10.6 million increase here, and we thought that we need to go a little deeper. It was very disappointing to see some of the responses back from the, from our request, because all of a sudden from a 0% to a 2%, the town seemed to fall apart. And it's, at the end of the day, though, Our department heads, they are doing a good job to try to cut costs, and if you speak to any one of them, they're doing everything they can. The problem is, and First Selectman referred to before, is that we have certain drivers in our budget that are absolutely out of control. It really began last year, where anything that we could do, where let's say we didn't contribute to our pension fund as much as we should, all the tricks were out of this budget, and now we're faced with a situation where we can expect another $10 million increase next year at least. We had one last year, we'll have one this year. I would guarantee that we're going to be having these $10 million increases each year. And it's simple math. You look at our debt service, it's going to be increasing. You look at our retiree benefit contribution. Next year, the actuaries say we will owe $2.7 million incrementally. The education department, there are fixed costs there which are going to drive it to increase. So this is not a good situation. And this is what's alarming many of us here, that how is this going to stop? Taxpayers are feeling the pain. There's going to be a certain point in time when they're going to have hit their threshold. So this exercise that we did here, this request, I think was really important. It actually gave both concerned taxpayers and concerned parents a great opportunity to look at what is the impact of things, or what is the impact here when we do make these cuts. And many of us saw, what actually happened. So something really significant has to happen in this town to turn this tide. We need concessions from the unions. These are all the thing is, what we're doing is we're taking resources from employees just to be able to fund the increases that are driven by their costs. So we need significant reform on our union contracts. We also, as Representative Richmond said, we also need to rethink how we're approaching town government, look at consolidations between the town and Board of Ed. We have to do everything's on the table here, because we are going to be looking in the next 3 budget cycles at a $300 million budget. That'll mean it would have doubled since the year 2000. And if I'm wrong, I would be very pleased. I would be very pleased. So, again, something has to be done, and I feel like not enough was done leading up to this budget to address the increases.
Mr. Representative Hurley? Call the question. Do I have a second? Representative Schwartz. Calling the question means we move straight to a vote. This takes a 2/3 vote to go straight to the vote. Yes. We're voting on the budget right now. That's correct. We have to vote on calling the question first. I'm just saying the implications of saying yes. That's correct. So the motion on the floor is to call the question so we can now vote on item number 4, which is the budget as presented. Item number 2. So we need a 2/3 majority, otherwise we just simply continue with discussion. So I am going to do a voice vote. All those in favor of calling the question to move to a vote on the budget, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Representatives Becker, Dean, Hochberg, and Marmion. And is that Ryan and was that Representative McKenzie? Okay. And Representative Mirabile. Okay, so that is that passes. So now we have before us the budget, which is a straight up or down vote. I can read it all over again. Representative Schwartz, motion. Representative Leah, second. All those in favor of waiving the reading, say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? We're going to do a roll call vote. To say yes, supports the budget. No, rejects the budget. I'd like the town clerk to call the roll call. Do you want to do it up here so people can hear, or are you okay? All right. Or this mic, you want to use this microphone? Actually, it won't reach. Just that's fine. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, you don't. You can do it from here. Everyone will hear you. Thanks.
David Becker? Michael Hurley? Gaylord Meyer? Carolyn Richmond? Eric Sundman? Pete Ambrose? John Matola? Jeff Steele? Chad Stewart? Keith Varian? Ed Bateson? Tom Conley? Hank Behrens? Dave McKenzie? Mary McCullough? Heather Dean? Joe DiMartino? Art Hug? Amy Mezoff? Joe Palmer? Matt Ambrose? Josh Garskoff? Chris McAleese? Ruth Smag? Ann Stamler? Chris Brogan? Lenora Campbell? Julie Gottlieb? Sheila Marmion? Jay Walt? Jen Hopper? Kevin Hopkins? Eric Newman? Mark Patton? Hal Schwartz? Kathy Braun? Dana Carey? Alan Marks? Tom McCarthy? Jeff Stopa? Bill D'Amica? Joe Fillner? Ellen Jacob? Nick Morelli? Carol Pontrelli? Lee Hannon? Ken Lee? Bruce Ryan? Carol Webb?
The vote fails 2029. Obviously, we're in waters that we haven't been in a long time because now we don't have a budget. According to the town charter, we need to approve a budget tonight, even if it goes to tomorrow or the next day. A budget must be approved. I'm going to call recess, 10-minute recess. Okay, I'm bringing the meeting back to order. Can I ask everyone to please take their seats? So I apologize that we had a long delay there with recess. There was just a bit of a miscommunication on a procedural issue here, and right now we are back to the meeting and item number 2, essentially. But really, unless I hear a motion to reconsider, we're really at item number 3. Representative Bateson. So, on the floor is a motion to reconsider, and reconsider is bringing back the prior item. Only someone on the prevailing side can make that motion. The prevailing side was a rejection of the budget. Therefore, Representative Bateson has made the motion. Anybody can make the second. Representative Schwartz. This item is not amendable, but it is debatable. Do I hear any comment or discussion from the public? And it requires a majority vote. Representative Campbell.
Representative Campbell, District 6. We call for a unanimous vote of the entire body in support of the motion to reconsider. Democrat and Republican, as elected representatives of this town, we need to fulfill our obligations. Let's do the responsible thing, follow the town charter, and do the hard work to pass the budget.
Any other discussion among the body on the motion to reconsider? We're now going to do a vote to reconsider. Those saying yes brings item number 2 back on the floor. If we say no, I've got to figure out what we do next. All those in favor of reconsidering item number 2, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please raise their hand. Representative Sundman, Representative McCullough, Representative Meyer, Representative Richmond. Abstentions. Item number 2 is back on the floor. I am opening it up to the body right now for discussion, for motions, for calling the question, whatever you want. I would assume we shouldn't do that. I would advise you not to. Representative Mirabile. Just turn it on.
I don't know if I should take the podium, which is very presidential, or speak from here as a candidate. But I guess I'll speak from here and talk as a candidate and let you know why I voted down the budget, a little bit of why I'm not in favor of this excess budget. I too received, obviously, hundreds of emails from both sides. We've got people holding up both signs, and we've got a split in this room, and obviously many opinions. And there's nobody more passionate than a parent that speaks about their child, which is why we do seem to get a majority of emails from parents talking about the Board of Ed. That's why the Board of Ed is such a hot issue. Nobody more passionate than a parent. This is Nick Mirabile, District 9. I have two children, one in Riverfield and one at Tomlinson Middle School. So I understand that. But, I'm so close to that side of the argument that I like to think about the other side and read you a quick email or a piece of an email I got to remind people that it's not a 90-10 swing like we talked about. I received an email that should touch us all, and this individual said, last year my property taxes went up 25%. This is not a typo. In that same year that you raised our taxes 25%, the value of our home had decreased close to 50%. We are between a rock and a hard place because we can no longer afford to live in Fairfield. We can't afford to sell our home at its current value. An insult to injury, no one wants to purchase my home in Fairfield because of the excessive taxes. So there could be a slight exaggeration in there about the decrease in value. 50% is drastic, but there are people out there that are in a position that they can't afford to live in Fairfield, and it's a reflection of the increases we've had. So my concern is that we are going to lose that diversity. And let me tell you a quick story about Fairfield as it was. 20 years ago, in 1990, I got married and I bought my house in Fairfield. It was a starter home, and it was on Beaumont Street. My wife and I were 26, and we affectionately referred to our street as newlyweds and nearly beds. And the reason was we had young people moving on our street that could afford a starter home. It was under $200,000. And my wife and I and a couple other couples were moving on the street as the seniors died off or moved out. But we had seniors, and next door to me was a gentleman who was 83, and he lived to 93, and for 10 years I took care of him. I made sure there was batteries in the smoke detectors. I drove him to the doctors, I took him to church. I checked on him. He lived alone, and he lived to 93, and that's what the community is about, is having seniors in this town, seniors that built this town. Seniors that were on the Board of Ed, seniors that were on the RTM, seniors that were volunteers, just like all of us in this room. And if we continue to raise these taxes, we're not only going to push these seniors out earlier, but we're not going to have newlyweds moving in. We have to curtail this spending. We have to talk about how to do it. As Representative Braun mentioned, in the past decade, the Board of Ed budget has increased by 60%. When I moved here in 1990, it's off my chart, but I bet the Board of Ed budget was about $30 million. 10 years ago it was $93 million. Now it's $150 million. I mean, these increases are astronomical. Our debt service is up 62% in the past decade. The town budget is up 43% in the past decade. We have to talk about efficiencies, renegotiate these contracts, and we have to have open discussion about what this town wants to do. We just can't say, spend, 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 because my son wants to be in Latin. We got to have, large print books at the library. We all understand those things. Nobody's against those things. What we are against is pushing out the diversity in this town. One other quick note that I want to mention is, some of the emails I got, and I agree with most of them, and I got them from a lot of constituents and friends in District 9. One of the things they mentioned is, hey, Westport spends more on schools than we do. Wilton spends more on schools than we do per person. This is getting ridiculous. Fairfield's a joke. We got to put money in education. Every penny, the more money in education, the better. Westport does put more money in education per person, per pupil, really. They do close to $17,000. Wilton does $16,000. But the median household income in Wilton is $170,000. The median household income in Westport is $160,000. The median household income in Fairfield is $103,000. So you can say they put more money into the schools. They can afford it. We have to face reality. $103,000, we can't afford it. So when you talk about spending per household, the median household income, Fairfield's at the top of the list. Fairfield is above Wilton. We're above Westport. We're above Easton. We're above New Canaan. We're above Darien. We're above Greenwich. So don't think we don't put money in education. We just have to be careful what we're doing with money and how much we're spending. Thank you.
Any other members? Sorry, Representative Ambrose.
Peter Ambrose. Peter Ambrose, District 2. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Dr. Title, I'd like to ask a question relative to the number of slated retired teachers that are retiring this year. It's my understanding that at the present time, 12 teachers have announced the retirement. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were you asked by Selectman Walsh to produce an analysis over the last 5 years as to the number of teachers who announced the retirement as of this evening, the night of the budget hearing, and those who actually retired that same year? I believe was there a variance between the amounts, the numbers? And have you produced a report?
Hi, good evening. We only have the data for 3 years. We didn't track the information by exact date the letter came in until 2008, 2009. But the overall retirements have exceeded the number of budgeted retirements in each of the last 3 years. In 2008, 2009, we budgeted 10 retirements. Ended up with 12 total retirements. Of those, 8 came in after the RTM vote. In 2009, 2010, there were 6 retirements that came in after the RTM vote for a total of 18. 12 were budgeted. So there has been a pattern of some retirements coming in after the conclusion of the RTM proceedings.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Title. I, too, received hundreds of emails over the last month, and Representative Schwartz, with all due respect, up until the last week, I received more emails in favor of cutting the budget than I did supporting the budget. I, too, feel that there must be a decrease in the budget. I think some balance has to be found in where we're moving as a town, as a community. And I respect both points of view, but I honestly feel that we've got to make a meaningful cut in the budget and have to stick to that going forward. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Vaughn?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Dr. Title again. I need a clarification on that. What I heard was in 08-09, there were 10 budgeted, 12 actual, 8 after the vote. In 9-10, there were 12 budgeted, 18 actual, 6 after the vote. No data for the year 2010-2011, no data for the present year. But I understand we actually have figures for the present year. 10 budgeted, 12 have retired so far. There's 60 days left between now and the end of the fiscal year. And I also heard anecdotally that we actually had 20 retirees in the last fiscal year. Could you just clarify that?
In the current year, we had the question that Representative Andros asked was, how many did we budget this year and how many do we have? And the answer was we budgeted for 12 and we have 12. In the event that we get additional retirements, there are times when, and we did this last year, when I recommended that the board take some of the cut out of retirements, but the board operates with no contingency at all. It operates with no reserve fund for staff, and so we cannot in good conscience simply go in and cut all the anticipated retirements because it leaves us with absolutely no net. And we know by the statute that we cannot get any additional funds without going back to the town. So we cannot do that. The question I was asked last week was how many people retired between the Board of Ed meeting, RTM meeting, and June 30th. And the answer then was 17. We went back and looked. After June 30th last year, there were 3 additional retirements, so we did end up by September 1st with a total of 20. But we did have 17 by June 30th, but not all of those had come in at the time the board was considering its budget adjustments. So the board has to consider its budget adjustments at the second meeting in May for us to turn the budget over. So even after the board does it, there could be additional retirements that happen. It's a fluid process, but it's also one that in the event that for some enrollment reason, we need to hire an extra teacher, or somebody moves in and we have to hire an extra pair-professional, that's where we can find, money to make that happen without having to compromise elsewhere. Hope that explains it.
One more. So the year 2010, 2011, we actually had either 17 or 20 retirees. 20. And what was the budget for that year?
The budget was originally 10, and then the board cut 2 more in its budget adjustments for a total of 12.
And the average savings, I understand, is $35,000 per retiree because the new hires cost less?
That's how we do our budget, yes. Sometimes you save more than that, and sometimes you save less than that. It all depends on the experience level of the person you hire, but we budget an average savings of $35,000. In addition to that, we budget other turnover to the tune of $360,000 that also has to materialize, that we have no idea at this moment that it will materialize. So we're building in assumptions about turnover that need to be materialized, and if we end up with a shortage in the other turnover account, then an overage in the retirement account will help pay for that as well.
Thank you.
Dr. Title, I have a question.
Sure.
Do you ever recommend or suggest or ask people to hold off their retirement until after the RTM vote or after June 30th?
No.
Any other members?
Done with me?
You're done. Representative Gottlieb, I'm sorry.
Still on? Great. Julie Gottlieb, District 6. I think this will be an easy one, but just as a point of clarification for you, Mr. Moderator, to Dr. Title. We've heard a couple numbers about the amount that the budget has gone up in the past years. If I look at the budget book, am I correct in, if you look at the year 2001 to 2002, we had 8,284 students. Current school year, we have 10,287. My math does 2,003 students, or an increase of 24.2%. Is that correct?
Without going to my book and looking it up, I would say that sounds like it's in the ballpark.
Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Palmer?
Sorry, Dr. Tyler, one more question for you. I basically just wanted to get a sense from you, if you had any type of projection for what kind of cost increases that you'll have next year, and what kind of, let's say, this year was a 2.5% increase. Can we expect a similar increase next year, or is there any driver that will push that beyond the 2.5?
Well, I'm trying to make it through this year. We really try to, when we put the budget together, and if we have to reduce a budget, try not to just create holes that in future budgets we have to fill up. And when the board did the cut last year, one of the reasons that this budget is as low as it is we didn't cut something last year we had to just put back in. The biggest drivers of our budget, obviously, are labor contracts, which are still in the 2 to 2.25% range for next year. We still anticipate enrollment will grow next year by approximately another 100 students, so that's a driver for us as well. The big numbers that are out there that can influence us that are not known at this time, things like health insurance. That's because we're self-insured, as is the town. There's no way of predicting where that's going to land in the future because it's completely dependent on what the experience is like between now and next November. So that's really a hard one to call, and that often can be a big driver. The other one that's out there that obviously is a concern, although most of our employees are not in the town's pension plan, those that are, we do have a pension number in the budget. And again, depending on the actual projections and what the annual required contribution will be, that could be an impact on us. But those are the big ones. So the one we know is the labor costs will probably be about the same as we have this year. We're going to be in the 2% range. But all the other big drivers are still unknown. One of the things we have next year that's a big unknown is our bus contract is up for bid. Bus contract up for bid could work in our favor or could work against us. We do know we're going to have about a $350,000 savings in busing because the grandfather will be over with. So we know that's coming off. So those are sort of the big picture factors that are out there. And we continue to look for offsets whenever we can, as we did this year.
Anything from the state that?
The state is in a state of flux. The General Assembly is considering the budget right now as we speak, I believe. And we anticipate that our reps do a good job up there and that the ECS money will probably stay the same going forward. Now, that doesn't buy you as much every year because the inflation erodes it. I don't see a big change coming in our state revenue. I don't see a big change coming in our federal revenue. But all the costs that those pay for go up, and so the buying power does get eroded. But I don't see a big decline in our state revenue, our federal revenue. But both those budgets are subject to major negotiation among the parties, and so it's really hard to tell. I don't see those as big drivers. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I just stay here.
Representative Becker?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. Last week there was a proposal that was put on the table. Everybody knows about it. It included a 2% across the board reduction. We've spoken quite a bit about it this evening. Obviously, the Board of Education number in that, due to the large size of our budget that the Board of Ed comprises, came in at a very substantial number at $2.9 million. While I do believe that in the long run, what we need to do is start looking at managing down, keeping increases, certainly at a minimum over time. I believe that one of the largest areas that I spoke about earlier this evening that savings can come from is working with the town. And one of the biggest problems that we have here is that the town doesn't seem to be working with the Board of Education in order to drive some of those savings. And I think in the absence of those, some of them being on the IT side, which again I mentioned, I quite frankly think the Board of Education does a better job of than the town. But I think in the absence of the administration's willingness to do this, then the decreased number needs to come down, quite frankly, substantially. I would propose, and I'm going to make an amendment to the budget in the Board of Education line item for it to be $250,000. Now, looking at the $35,000 assumption, you have Dr. Title, that would actually come out, that extra $8 would come out to $280,000. I'm actually going to bring this motion down a little bit. Certainly, you may not hit that number, but I do believe you're going to get very close to that number and probably hit that 20 over the course of the next few months. So I think I'm comfortable that that is not going to be a service level type of reduction. It's more of an adjustment after reviewing this budget. So I would make a motion, Mr. Moderator, to reduce the Board of Education by $250,000, and I think we need to leave it at that at this time. And I would urge the First Selectman, the administration, the Board of Selectmen, everybody in town, this entire body, and I'm certainly going to lead this conversation, that we need to work as one town with the Board of Education, and we need to figure out who does what the best way and how through state statutes to find money between both sets of budgets. And I would hope that the Board of Education and the superintendent, they've shown quite a bit of willingness all the way along, would do that over the course of, I would say, the next year. And I don't mean the budget. The budget starts in February, but this actually is a great time. When we slow down on our everybody is out almost every single night dealing with the budget season, it's a time when we can start doing this work now, do the heavy lifting now to prepare for next year's budget. So I would hope that this body and the other bodies would do that. So again, hopefully someone will second and
Okay, so the motion on the floor right now is to reduce line item 8010, Board of Education, by $250,000, which, according to my math, would then leave it with $148,936,464. Linda, I think you're nodding yes. Is that correct? Is there a second on that motion? Representative Meyer. Discussion on this amendment to cut Board of Education by $250,000. Representative Marmion.
Sheila Marmion, District 6. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Dr. Title. Dr. Title, could you comment, please, on if this amendment was to pass, where you might work with the Board of Ed to take that money from?
You always like to put me on the spot. First, I want to be clear, it's not my decision. The way it works is, I can make a recommendation, the Board of Education, they're all sitting here, there's 9 of them, they were elected, they get the final say. Last year, the budget cut was obviously much greater, or the reduction was much greater. I put a list together. The board did accept quite a bit of that list, but they did make some changes and asked me to come up with different ones. So what I say here may never even happen. Certainly if we had, as we did last year, if we were to land 5 or 6 retirements between now and when the board needs to make a vote, I might recommend that a couple of those be taken as part of this cut because I feel safe that we still had the cushion in place. But that would depend on the crystal ball that I don't have right now. Last year, I put a proposal on the table for $250,000 to institute a pay-for-play system at the high school sports. That was not something the board was interested in. They may not be interested in it again this year. So I can't render any opinion about that, but obviously, since I put it on the table last year, people know that, you know, it's an option. Another option is to go into a number of different accounts and slice a small amount off of each one of those without touching. I will not recommend cuts to maintenance or technology as I did last year. That's been a mistake, I think, that we've made over the years, and it's cost us dearly because we don't put the money into maintenance and we end up with big expenses down the road. So there would be a lot of options for this, but I couldn't hazard a guess as to which one will fly or which one won't. And I'm sure there's probably 7 or 8 other options that could be generated as well. I do this in a collaborative way with my administrative team in consultation with the principals and other folks to see where we would have the least impact on the school system. That's really as specific as I can be, because although I'm technically a department head, I don't have the authority to enact anything that I just talked about.
Can I ask a follow-up question for you, Mr. Moderator? Can I ask a member of the Board of Ed, perhaps the chairwoman, to come up and comment and answer the same question? Thank you.
Pamela Iacono, Chairman of the Board of Education. As I told you all last week when we had this discussion, we have not had a board meeting between now and today, and I can't speak to a line item cut. So I don't know what the preference of the board is on what they would want to do. Certainly we would take into consideration what administration puts forth, but it doesn't mean that that's where we want to go. I can tell you personally, I'd be a little bit hesitant to hit too hard into the retirements, because what if we don't get them? I might lean towards something like pay to play. That's more guaranteed, and I don't want to have to affect class size. That's my personal opinion. I've got 8 other people that I need to work with, and we need to make that decision. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. I can't support the motion. The Board of Selectmen made this exact cut of $250,000, and our Board of Finance thought it was in the best interest of the Board of Education to put it back in. The Board of Finance is the elected body that we ask to take care of the town finances. They thought it was worth putting it back in. I'm not exactly sure how us as a legislative body can turn around and say, we know better than them. If we know better than them, maybe we should be the Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance should be the RTM. I urge you to vote against this cut. The Board of Finance made their statement. They wanted the money back in, and I think we should keep it there. Thank you.
Representative Richmond.
Carolyn Richmond, District 1. As a former teacher, I know that there are ways to cut things. Sometimes we've been asked not to use as much paper on the copy. I did it. I know that when you're running a business, if you can't cut 0.167% out of your budget, then you're not a very good manager. We are not going to impact the quality of the education of our children. That comes from the teachers and the parental support. That's what makes a difference. Cutting $250,000 is just simply saying we're asking all of the departments in this town, please pay a little attention and help our taxpayers. Is this enough? No, for me it's not enough, because I think there could be more without impacting the quality of our programs. But we have a motion on the floor of $250,000. I will support it because I am here to support cuts to try to make this a more reasonable budget. And if you can't manage 0.167% out of your budget, then what kind of manager are you? So I'm supporting this, and I urge you all to do the same. Thank you.
Representative Sandberg.
Stanley, District 5. First of all, I just want to note that I have been impressed over the past 6 months by the efforts on the part of the First Selectman to develop a cooperative relationship with the Board of Education and with the Board of Education's response to those efforts. Addressing this particular motion, over the past 2 years, I've developed a pretty strong respect for the integrity of our Superintendent of Education in relation to budgeting. I hope and believe he has presented an honest budget without tricks and without hidden surplus. I personally do not have children in the public school system, though my own education was entirely public from kindergarten through postgraduate. That was a different era, and there were different needs. So my criterion is not my own experience. I need to listen to my constituents, to the parents and children who rely on and use this enormous service, our schools. The overwhelming number of them who reached out to us have asked us to support the Board of Education's budget, and therefore I cannot support this motion.
Any other members? Representative Garskoff?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. Well, certainly 250 is a lot better than 2.9 million. I think everyone who supports the budget, who supports the education budget would agree with that, but it doesn't, I still don't support it. And I would also like to point out that good schools are actually the strongest thing we have for our property values. Good schools are what drive property values in this town. That is number one. And also I'd like to point out that last year's cuts, I don't mean budget cuts, although this is the budget cuts caused the cuts in programming. 3 that I'm aware of are JV sports in the middle schools, I think late bus at the high schools, 4th and 5th grade Spanish was cut in half, I believe. I'm not sure, but that's my understanding. I think there's other things I don't even know about. Those are pretty much permanent cuts that we created as a body. They will probably not come back in our lifetimes, because in order to start putting things back, we're cutting every year. In order to put things back, it would be a huge cliff. So every cut we make is something that's never going to come back. I don't know what this 250 would translate to. It sounds like the Board of Ed doesn't know yet. But I urge people to vote this down. We got a very lean budget from the Board of Ed, as far as I can tell. And this money that we cut results in cuts in programming that's just never going to come back. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a hand in the back earlier, but Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4. I am a Connecticut licensed teacher, elementary, and I did my student teaching at McKinley School in 2009. And during that time, I got to meet a lot of families that rely on extra funding within the school to help them, volunteers that would help them. I'm concerned that by making this budget cut to the Board of Ed, that we're going to cause more children to not be able to participate in sports that they otherwise would. And I'll give you an example. I received a really compelling email today, and it was from a mom who told me that her son was not able to go on the 8th grade field trip because they just didn't have the funding for it. And it really bothered me, because that should not be the case ever. So this child is not going. And now I see how we're going to become the slippery slope where we're no longer going to be funding after-school curricular events that children can enjoy. We don't have intramurals. You have to compete and make a team. We have Park and Rec that you have to pay for to be on. I cannot support this cut. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Mezzo.
name's Amy Mezza from District 4. Just a couple of things that came to me through email and a number of people in my district. I would say it was about 50-50 in the emails. And I found that surprising considering the number of PTA blasts that I think we all got. Sometimes they were actually attached to the email. I have to agree with Ms. Dean because, no child should go without. A bigger concern, though, rather than sports to me, is the number of kids who now qualify for free or reduced lunch prices. In the last, well, 04-05, 5% of the students in this town qualified. That's 441 kids. In 10-11, 918 kids qualified for reduced lunch or a free lunch. That tells me that families are having trouble making ends meet. And if that's the case, I think it's not unreasonable to cut $250,000 out of a budget of that size. That, Mr. Schwartz, I cannot agree with you. You cannot say on the one hand, we're not doing our job if we don't go line by line by line, and then say, I trust my Board of Finance. As a body, it's broad strokes when it comes to the budget, because we have more than just the budget to consider. The Board of Finance has only budgetary issues to consider. I will support this $250,000 cut. Actually, let me amend what I said. I would support this reduction of the increase, $250,000. I don't think it will truly harm anyone, but I think we have to pay attention to those students whose families are not able to pay for things. And I'm not talking about sports, I'm talking about food.
Thank you. Representative Bateson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to make a motion to
Suspend
the rules to take up new business after 11 p.m.
Okay, that's Rule 36, rules regulate, suspend the rules to, we're not going to start any new item because this is the item, but to continue talking past 11:30.
That's what I meant.
Is there a second? I just want to clarify. Representative Garskoff, to suspend the rules, we need a 2/3 vote here. We're clearly going to go to tomorrow anyways, but it's just a matter of if everyone wants to continue talking tonight. And I will suggest this as well. If you approve this, then anyone can make a motion to adjourn at any point. It doesn't mean we're going to go on forever. So it just gives us a little more time to continue debating. So all those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye. Aye. Those against? Or we're going to have to take a roll call, I'm sorry.
David Becker? No. Mike Hurley? No. Gaylord Meyer? No. Carolyn Richmond? No. Eric Sunman? No. Pete Ambrose? No. John Matola? No. Jeff Steele?
Yes.
Chad Stewart? No. Keith Varian? Ed Bateson? Yes. Tom Conley? Hank Ferentz? Dave McKenzie? Mary McCullough? Heather Dean? Joe DiMartino? Art Hug? Amy Mezoff? Joe Palmer? Matt Ambrose? Josh Garskoff? Chris McAleese? Ruth Smay? Ann Stamler? Chris Brogan? Lenora Campbell? Julie Gottlieb? Sheila Marmion? Jay Walk? Jen Hochberg? Kevin Hopkins? Eric Newman? Mark Patton? Hal Schwartz? Kathy Braun? Dana Carey? Alan Marks? Tom McCarthy? Jeff Stopa? Bill D'Amica? Joe Fellner? Ellen Jacob? Nick Marabli? Carol Pontrelli, Lee Hannum, Ken Lee, Bruce Ryan, Carol Way.
We needed 33 votes to pass. Well, it was 30. It did not pass. Let's put it that way.
Do I still have the floor? Because I did want to
You still
address
do
it.
have the floor. Yeah, the vote was again 33 against, 16 in favor. So officially, it did not pass. So we will end at 11:30.
Okay,
Go on.
thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bates in District 3. I did want to address the proposal on the floor, the 250 cut to the BOE. I do support it. Personally, would I like to see it more? Yeah, I would. I think we could handle more in that budget. When it comes, Mr. Schwartz had mentioned something about Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. I've always looked at their roles in this matter differently. I always looked at the Board of Finance. Their obligation is to fund operations, and I've always viewed them in a different light than us. My attitude at the end of the day is, do I want to pay for it? It's a simple question. I think Board of Finance looks at it from a higher point of view than us. I think I'm more parochial in it, just saying, do I want to pay for it? This number is 0.2% of the operating budget, especially for a budget this size. I think you can absorb it. So I urge everyone to support this, and I really think we can live with this. Thank you.
Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. I said my piece about this motion, but I would now like to say that we should, I believe as a body, we owe it to the crowd to vote tonight on the education budget. Thank you.
Representative Stewart. There is a motion to call the question. Representative Smay, the second. We will now vote on this, 2/3 vote. Any, let's say, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Representative Becker, Representative Hopkins, Representative Schwartz, Representative Lee, Representative Newman, Representative Patton, Representative Walk, Representative DiMartino, Representative Carey, Representative Fellner, Representative Smay, and I think I got you, Representative Carey. Oh, and Representative Stanmore. Abstentions? I assume. Okay, so calling the question, that motion passed 37-12. So we now have before us the vote to reduce the education budget by $250,000 to a total of $148,936,464. We're going to do a roll call vote.
David Becker,
Yes.
Michael Hurley, Gaylord Meyer, Carolyn Richmond, Eric Sunman, Pete Ambrose, John Matola, Jeff Steele, Chad Stewart, Keith Varian, Ed Bateson, Tom Conley, Hank Ferentz, Dave McKenzie, Mary McCullough, Heather Dean, Joe DiMartino, Art Hug, Amy Mezoff, Joe Palmer, Matt Ambrose, Josh Garskoff, Chris McAleese, Ruth Smay, Ann Stamler, Chris Brogan, Lenora Campbell, Julie Gottlieb, Sheila Marmion, Jay Walk? Jen Hochberg? Kevin Hopkins? Eric Newman? Mark Patton? Hal Schwartz? Kathy Braun? Dana Carey? Alan Marks? Tom McCarthy? Jeff Stopa? Bill D'Amica? Joe Fellner? Ellen Jacob? Nick Morabili? Carol Pontrelli? Lee Hannum? Ken Lee? Bruce Ryan? Carol Way? Joe DiMartino?
The motion carries 27-21-1. So at this point, the budget is still up for discussion. There's been suggestion, we at this point have to look again at line item. We're here till 11:30, and or however everyone wants to deal with this. But Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. Just a point of clarification. We cannot take up any additional debate after 11, though? Is that correct?
What it is, we can't take any new items. There's only, in other words, we can't take up the WPCA tonight, even if we were to finish this. So we can continue discussing this item till 11:30. It's really only half the rule applies. We can't discuss beyond 11:30. This item's still on the table, even if we talk about a different budget.
And amendments can be made to
Sure.
this item.
It's all one item.
All the way up to 11:30. Okay. Just want to clarify on the rules. Thank you.
So right now, the rest of the budget is on the floor. If anyone wants to discuss or make motions on any other aspect of the budget, they're welcome to. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Mezzo. Okay, there is a motion to adjourn, which is in order right now. We just need a second. It's non-debatable, non-amendable. Majority vote. Second by Representative Stewart. So now we're just going to do a vote on to adjourn or not. All those in favor of adjourning, say yes. This is not going to work. How about hands? Can I see hands? Yes? Okay. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Just, should we do a roll call on that, you think? Or, all right, we're gonna do a roll call real quick.
David Becker?
Okay. We don't have to clarify to what time we're adjourning because it's automatic. We're coming back tomorrow, so we're adjourning. Or that's the motion on the floor is to adjourn. It's been seconded. So to say yes is the meeting is now over until tomorrow at 8 o'clock. If you say no, we continue till 11:30.
Dave Becker? Michael Hurley? Gaylord Meyer? Carolyn Richmond? Eric Sonman? Pete Ambrose? John Matola? Jeff Steele?
No.
Chad Stewart? Keith Varian? Ed Bateson? Tom Conley? Hank Ferentz? Dave McKenzie? Mary McCullough? Heather Dean? Joe DiMartino? Art Hug? Amy Mezoff? Joe Palmer? Matt Ambrose? Josh Garskoff? Chris McAleese? Ruth Smay? Ann Stamler? Chris Brogan, Lenora Campbell, Julie Gottlieb, Sheila Marmion, Jay Walk, Jen Hochberg, Kevin Hopkins, Eric Newman, Mark Patton, Hal Schwartz, Kathy Braun, Dana Carey, Alan Marks, Tom McCarthy, Jeff Stopa, Bill D'Amica, Joe Fellner, Ellen Jacob, Nick Marabli, Carol Pontrelli, Lee Hannum, Ken Lee, Bruce Ryan, Carol Way.
The vote was 24-24, the motion fails, so we're still here. 24-25, motion fails. Either way. So, I'm sorry? 24-25. So, we're still here. I don't have any jokes to tell, and it's really up to all you at this point. Representative Palmer.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the H. Smith Richardson Golf Course budget by $27,801. That would eliminate a new mower. I had a great conversation today with the department head, Jerry Lombardo, and he seemed to be comfortable with us deferring this to next year. Again, just to be able to help us reduce the increase to the budget. So, and one other thing, just Jerry has some great ideas about how we can maybe improve the his entire department and processes going forward to be able to get us some savings. And he's very interested in talking to us over the summer when we do continue this conversation about how to save money by through consolidations and just out of the box thinking. So.
Yep.
Sorry. It's H. Smith course, 57,000. That's the
Line item 7113?
Oh yeah, 7113.
Okay. And it's to reduce it, what's the number?
27,801.
27,801. Okay. So that's to reduce the number from 1,562,545 down 27,801.
Correct.
Okay, just doing the math here, if somebody has it real quick.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
clarification.
Yes.
In the department recommendation, it's 27,810. Is that a mistake on here?
Yeah, that's a mistake. Yeah, I had it as 801. So yeah, I guess it's 810.
So what is the final number then?
27,810. Thank you.
810, okay.
Good catch.
I think that reduces that number. I need to calculate because my handwriting's all messed up.
Before I start.
No, that's okay. Let's try it again. Linda, do you have that number? $1,534,735. Okay, do I have a second on that motion to reduce H. Smith Richardson line item 7113 by $27,810? Representative Richmond, discussion on that amendment? Representative Mottola?
John Mottola, District 2. The problem that I have with this is that this is a 1991 mower that is used to mow tees and approaches. And our director has indicated that this 1991 mower has outlived its useful life. The impact of not replacing this piece of equipment will cost us some time and labor, as we will have continual breakdowns and repairs. It's just one of those things that we're just going to defer. And if you remember during one of our meetings several months ago on the golf course is one of the things in Fairfield that makes money. And this was part of a plan to, over a period of time, I'm not going to use the word upgrade, but maintain the golf course so individuals want to come and play there. And my fear is that if we cut this, we're taking a step backwards. And this item is going to be before us next year. So I'm not in favor of this. Thank you.
Representative Lake?
Ken Lee, District 10. Just to follow up on that question, is Jerry here? And Jerry, so I'll give you the question so you'll be ready when you get here.
Through the moderator.
Through the moderator, excuse me, sir. The question I have is, because this is a revenue-generating department, will this have any impact upon revenue? That is to say, will it make it less desirable? And the second question is, if we don't buy it, do we need to set some money aside to maintain it? All yours, and I'm done.
As I said in my explanation, we didn't budget money to repair it because we expected to replace it. If we don't get the funding for it, we will make it through the season. But as last year, we do have a capital replacement program. We try to follow it, and we have to keep the course running. So we will make do if it does get cut. We prefer not to. We wouldn't have asked for it if we didn't think we needed it. The Board of Finance saw fit to approve this piece of apparatus for us, so we would like to keep it to maintain the facility.
Representative Scanlon.
And Stanley, District 5. I'm not a golfer, so I'm a little surprised at standing before you on this item. But I just want to comment actually on something that was said a few times in previous discussion, which is some disappointment with department heads for coming in with the recommendations, or not with the recommendations, with the statements they did of where the recommended cuts would impact their department. I think that our department heads are the experts. We hired them, we pay them a lot of money to do what they do, and we are saying that we do need to trust them. The original proposal for an overall department cut was to trust the department heads. So I think we should, and I think that they have demonstrated that we can. In relation to this particular recommendation, the statement is made here. The impact of not replacing this piece of equipment will cost us in time and labor. We have not increased the expense account in this budget for repairs. So by not replacing this piece of equipment. We will save money for the equipment, but we will have to spend money on repair, which will be added to the eventual cost of replacing the equipment, which will probably be higher when it's replaced. So I cannot support this cut.
Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. I can't support the cut either. We sit here and we talk about maintenance issues and pay for it now instead of pay for it later. Why would we defer something to pay for it again or pay for it next year? We've done it in the past and we know it doesn't work. So are we just cutting for the sake of cutting? We've asked the department heads, we've asked the town to give us a capital plan. This is what needs to be replaced when. Follow the plan. Well, he gave us a plan, and now you want to change it. So what's the point of getting a plan if we're going to change it in the middle of it? So this is a piece of equipment that needs to be replaced. I'm not exactly sure why it is that we would look to cut a piece of equipment that needs to be replaced or pay for repairs down the road or additional hours of the manual labor that needs to be done because the equipment doesn't work right. It just seems like we're kicking the can down the road, and when we do that, we just end up paying more anyway.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator, at Bateson District 3. Jerry, you said the magic words, we'll get by. That's all I need to hear. I mean, happens to me at home. Boiler goes out, hot water heater in October, guy comes out, service it, and you can get by. It's magic to my ears. I'm going to take you up on it. I ask everyone to support it. Kicking it down the road, I do it all the time in life. If I can get by another season with something, I'm going to take you up on it. I ask everyone to support it.
Any other members? Representative Hurley.
Mike, sorry.
Michael Hurley, District 1. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I do have a couple of questions about the piece of equipment for Jerry. How old is the lawnmower tractor in question? 1991. Is it a Craftsman? Is it a Caterpillar? Is it a John Deere? A Toro, you think? What is the life expectancy generally on a tractor like that?
About 7 years.
About 7 years. And what in particular about the tractor makes you think that it needs to go? I mean, like a boiler could crack and obviously it needs to be replaced. Is there a problem with the specific engine?
I don't have all the particulars. I don't have all the particulars on what's actually wrong with the machine. It's 1991. What we do is we rotate our machines as we get new capital replacement items. Okay? But it's a consistent breakdown of the engines, brakes, everything on it, okay, the reels. So what we do is we rotate them, and that's why we keep lasting. I mean, this is 91, useful life of a mower on a golf course, according to the superintendent the other day, was 7 years. So we keep rotating it from greens to this, and now it's out of the service. It would be out of service. We take the present greens mower and have it do the approaches, and then we buy the new greens mower.
But it is working now, right? I mean, it's cutting grass.
At times, yes. It breaks down. It is working, but it consistently is in the shop being fixed. So it's taking time away from other things getting done.
Is it, and this will be my last question, is it, I mean, what is consistently breaking? Is it the belts, or is it a new piece or a part of the tractor?
It's all of the above. I mean, the belts, leaking of oil, the hydraulics on it.
I mean, I have to support this motion to hold off on another year. I mean, either it needs to be jumped now, or you can make it through on another year. And it just doesn't seem as if the tractor is at a point where it needs to be jumped. And I think we need to try and hold the line, you know, for taxpayers to the best of our ability. I hope you support the motion.
Representative Ambrose.
I'll be very brief, Peter Ambrose, District 2. If we can't support minor cuts that are sanctioned by department heads, we're going to be here for a long time. So, you know, let's get under this. I'm in favor of the motion.
Representative DiMartino.
Joe DiMartino, District 4. So here we are, we're talking about a $27,000 tractor that I know nothing about, and I don't claim to, nor do I really want to. But I think in all of these questions that we've been sitting up here for the past 20 minutes asking ourselves, I've learned that I'm not an expert in lawn golf course maintenance, and Mr. Lombardi, Jerry is. And I think that kind of makes my case that we can't go line by line and tell other people what groceries to buy and put in their car. And that's essentially what we're doing here. I think this has to be a top-down approach, and let the experts, i.e. the managers of each individual department and town area, determine where they need to spend their budget and leave it at that. This is getting too complicated.
Representative Stewart. I think, because I know you well, you're calling the question. Second, Representative Smay. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Representative Schwartz, Representative Hopkins, Representative Hochberg, Representative Hurley, Representative Becker, Representative Nezoff. I think that's it. And abstentions. So that motion carries. We're now going to move to a vote on this item. All those in favor of the amendment to cut $27,810 from line item 7113, is that correct? Bring it down to, $1,544,735. Please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hands. Ready? Representative Walk, Representative Lee, Representative Schwartz, Representative Hochberg, Representative Hopkins, Representative Gottlieb, Representative Campbell, Representative Stamler, Matola, Marmion, Stewart, and Ambrose. That's, I'm sorry, Dean. Missed you. Abstentions? Oh, and one other, Representative Hammer. Abstentions? The motion passes 35-14. 12 minutes. Representative Stewart. There's now a motion to adjourn again. A second by Representative Schwartz. Again, this is non-debatable, non-amendable. Majority vote. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Here we go. Representative Walk. Representative Patton, Representative Marks, it's getting late, Representative Brogan, Garskoff, McAleese, Yomika, who else we got here? Conley, and Representative Dean. Abstentions? (49) motion
passes. We are adjourned until tomorrow at 8 o'clock.